I never thought marriage could turn upside down so completely. When I stood at the altar years ago, I was the one in the suit, the one holding steady, the one who promised to lead. But now, sitting here in front of the mirror with lace brushing against my skin and lipstick trembling on my lips, I wonder how everything changed so much. She became the husband, and somehow I became her bride. My name is Mark. I'm 53 years old, an ordinary man with ordinary habits. Or at least that's who I used to be. I worked in accounting, lived a quiet life with my wife, Julia, and never imagined our roles could shift so dramatically. I was dependable, cautious, the kind of man who double-checked the locks every night and balanced the checkbook down to the last penny. Julia, on the other hand, was always vibrant, decisive, the one who could walk into a room and command it without even trying. Still, in our marriage, I wore the trousers, at least that's what I told myself. It all began innocently enough. Julia had been teasing me about how I carried myself, how rigid and anxious I seemed. "You don't know how to let go," she said one evening over dinner. "You're always wound tight, like you're afraid of losing control." I laughed nervously, brushing her words aside. "Someone has to keep things steady," I told her. "If not me, then who?" Her eyes sparkled, but behind them was something else, an idea, a plan forming quietly. "Maybe it's time we tried something different," she said. At first, I didn't understand what she meant. But little by little, Julia began to shift the balance in ways so subtle I barely noticed. She started making all the decisions: where we ate, what we bought, how the house was arranged. I thought she was just taking initiative. I didn't mind. It was easier to let her lead sometimes. But soon, the changes became more personal. It started with small suggestions. "Why don't you try on this shirt instead of that old one? It'll look softer on you." Or, "You should stand differently, less stiff, more graceful." She said it was just for fun, just playful experiments. And because I loved her, I went along. But the first time she brought me a dress delicate, flowing, clearly chosen with care, I froze. "Julia, you can't be serious," I said, my voice tight with disbelief. Her smile was calm, steady, and strangely reassuring. "Why not? Just for me. Just once. You've led long enough, Mark. Let me take the reins for a while. Let me be the husband." Something inside me shifted that night. I didn't know it then, but those few words were the beginning of everything, the beginning of a transformation I never expected, one that would turn my world upside down and redefine what love, marriage, and identity meant. And now, as I sit staring at my reflection dressed as her bride, I realize that what started as a game has become my reality. The first dress didn't feel like fabric, it felt like a line I was crossing. My hands trembled as I held it up, the soft folds spilling through my fingers. Julia stood with her arms crossed, not impatient, but determined, waiting for me to make the choice. "You don't have to be afraid," she said gently. "It's just cloth. But it's also more than that. It's trust." I swallowed hard, my pride colliding with my love for her. She had never asked for anything so strange before. My instincts screamed that this was wrong, that I'd lose myself if I gave in. And yet, when I looked at her, the steadiness in her eyes, the quiet strength in her stance, I knew I couldn't refuse. The dress slid over my shoulders more easily than I wanted to admit. The fabric hugged me differently than my shirts ever had, softer, flowing in ways that unsettled me. I caught sight of my reflection in the mirror and flinched. I looked ridiculous. But Julia stepped behind me, resting her hands on my shoulders. "Don't see what you fear," she whispered. "See what I see. You willing to let go. Willing to trust me. That's strength, Mark, not weakness." Her words lingered. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like the one carrying all the weight of decisions. She was leading, and I was following. Part of me hated it. Another part, when I tried to ignore, felt a strange relief. After that night, little rituals began to form. Julia chose what I wore around the house. Sometimes it was just softer colors, looser shirts, trousers that looked less rigid. Other times, it was something unmistakably hers, a blouse from her closet, a scarf she draped around my shoulders, a pair of slippers with delicate stitching. Each time, she framed it not as humiliation, but as liberation. "Stop thinking of clothes as barriers," she told me one afternoon as I stood nervously in the kitchen, wearing one of her cardigans. "Think of them as doors. Every door you open is a step closer to who you could be." I wanted to laugh, to argue, to push back. But the way she looked at me, steady, calm, unyielding, made me bite my tongue. Weeks passed, and the lines blurred. She stopped asking. She started instructing. "Wear this tonight. Walk with me like this. Hold your hands softer." Every correction was wrapped in patience, but there was no mistaking the shift. She was in charge now. And strangely, I found myself bending, not breaking. The moment that sealed it came one evening when we were preparing for dinner with her friends. I reached for my usual suit, but Julia laid a gown across the bed instead. My heart stopped. "Julia, I can't," I whispered. She walked up, her hand lifting my chin until my eyes met hers. "Yes, you can. Because I am your husband now, Mark. And tonight, you will be my bride." The words sent a chill through me. Terrifying, exhilarating, undeniable. I didn't move for a long moment. Then slowly I reached for the gown. The gown felt heavier than it should have, as though it carried the weight of 1,000 unspoken promises. My hands shook as I slid it on, every rustle of the fabric sounding like thunder in my ears. Julia didn't laugh. She didn't tease. She stood silently, watching with an expression I couldn't quite read. Pride? Possession? Something deeper. When I was finally dressed, she walked around me slowly, her fingers grazing the air as if she were sculpting me with her eyes. Then she sat me down in front of the mirror. "This is where it begins," she murmured, setting a small box on the vanity. I recognized the box immediately, her makeup kit. My stomach twisted. "Julia, this is too much," I said, my voice barely more than a croak. She shook her head, opening the kit and laying out brushes, powders, and lipsticks with the precision of a painter preparing a canvas. "Too much would be asking you to change who you are. I'm not. I'm just asking you to let me show the world a side of you that's always been here, hidden, waiting." Her hands were steady as she lifted a brush. I wanted to pull away, to protest, but something in her eyes rooted me in place. The first touch of powder against my skin was soft, almost reverent. "Relax," she whispered. "This isn't about erasing you. It's about revealing you." Minutes blurred as she worked. I couldn't bear to look at the mirror. Every sweep of color, every careful stroke, felt like another thread binding me to her will. By the time she leaned back, satisfied, my heart was pounding so loudly I thought it would shake the walls. "Look," she said. I hesitated, then forced myself to lift my eyes. The man I knew was gone. In his place was someone softer, almost unrecognizable. The lines of my face seemed blurred, reshaped not into a stranger, but into something I couldn't define. My breath caught. "Julia, what have you done?" Her lips curved into a smile that was neither mocking nor playful. It was firm, certain. "I've given you the first glimpse of who you can be. My bride." The word lodged in my chest. Bride. It was supposed to sound absurd, but in that moment it didn't. It sounded inevitable. From that day forward, the changes came in waves. She guided me on how to walk not with the heavy steps of a man, but with grace, as though the ground itself expected me to tread lightly. She corrected how I held my hands, how I sat, how I spoke. At first, I resisted. "This isn't me," I argued. Her reply was always calm, almost soothing. "Then who are you, Mark? Because the man you were is fading, and what's left is mine to shape." She began testing me in small, terrifying ways. A trip to the grocery store with my nails painted. A walk in the park wearing a scarf that clearly wasn't mine. Dinner with her friends where she insisted I speak less, smile more, let her do the talking. Each time, I felt exposed, trembling on the edge of humiliation. But Julia never let me fall. She was always there, steady, protective, firm. One evening, after we'd returned from such an outing, I confronted her. "Why are you doing this to me? To us?" She stepped close, her eyes locking with mine, her voice low and unwavering. Because we've been living a lie. You've been pretending to be the husband. But deep down, you've always needed someone to lead you, to claim you.
And
I've always wanted a bride, not a rival. Her confession hit me like a storm. It was madness. It was impossible. Yet, somewhere inside, it resonated with a truth I couldn't admit. The next morning, I found a garment bag hanging on the closet door. Inside was not one of my suits, but a wedding dress. Not white, not traditional, but elegant, shimmering, unmistakable. A note was pinned to it, written in Julia's neat, steady handwriting. "It's time to stop pretending, my bride. Tonight, you'll wear this for me." The wedding dress hung in the closet all day, like a shadow waiting to swallow me. I tried to distract myself, tried to lose myself in chores, in reading, in anything that might keep my eyes from drifting back to that garment bag. But it was impossible. It was there every time I passed the bedroom door, whispering of a future I wasn't ready to face. When Julia came home, she didn't ask if I'd looked inside. She simply kissed me on the forehead, took my hand, and said, "Dinner first. Then we'll talk about the dress." We ate in silence. My fork barely scraped at the food on my plate. Her calmness was more unnerving than any outburst could have been. She wasn't demanding. She wasn't threatening. She was certain. Afterward, she led me back to the bedroom. She unzipped the garment bag and let the dress spill into the light. Its satin folds shimmered faintly, as if mocking the terror in my chest.
"Try it on," she said.
"Julia, I can't." Her eyes held me in place. "You can. And you will. Not because I'm forcing you, but because we both know what this means." My hands trembled as I reached for the hanger. Slipping into the dress felt like stepping across a threshold I could never return from. The fabric slid over me, cool and heavy, molding itself to my frame. I expected to feel ridiculous. Instead, I felt bare, as though the dress had stripped away the last of my defenses. Julia fastened the last clasp and stepped back. "Beautiful," she whispered. I shook my head.
"No."
"I look like a joke." She came closer, cupping my face gently. "Do you think I'd make a joke of my bride? Look again, Mark. Not with your eyes, feel it. This isn't a costume. It's you." I turned toward the mirror. The reflection staring back was surreal, my body clad in satin, my face softened with the makeup she had insisted on earlier. My mind screamed that it wasn't real, that it was a game I could still walk away from. But my heart pounded with a different truth that Julia's words were sinking in, reshaping me. The next evening, she raised the stakes. "We've been invited to Linda's dinner party," she announced casually as she ironed a shirt not mine, but one of hers that looked suspiciously tailored for me. I froze. "Julia, I can't go out like this." Her tone was calm, but unyielding. "You'll wear what I give you. A simple dress, nothing extravagant. We'll see how you handle yourself in public. If you're my bride, the world needs to see it too." Panic surged through me. I imagined the laughter, the stares, the shame. But when the night came, Julia was immovable. She laid the outfit on the bed, a modest floral dress, soft cardigan, and flats. Not a parody, not exaggerated, just ordinary. "You'll blend in," she promised. "Trust me." And somehow I did. Walking into Linda's house was like stepping into fire. Every laugh, every glance felt directed at me. My palms sweated, my knees wobbled. Yet Julia's hand on mine was steady, grounding. She introduced me not as her husband, not even as Mark, but as if I were someone else entirely, her partner, her bride. Linda smiled politely. No one mocked me. Conversation flowed. I even found myself laughing once or twice, though the sound felt strange in my ears. When we left, Julia squeezed my hand.
"See?
The world didn't end. And you were radiant." That night, lying in bed, I whispered into the darkness, "I don't know who I am anymore." Julia's voice came back, firm but tender. "You're mine. That's all that matters." And somehow, it was both terrifying and comforting. I told myself the dinner party was a one-time ordeal, a test, something Julia would grow bored of once the thrill wore off. But she didn't. If anything, she became bolder. Each day, a new garment appeared on my side of the closet: blouses, skirts, delicate cardigans that carried her scent. My old clothes slowly vanished, as if swallowed by some quiet tide. Whenever I asked where they had gone, she only smiled. You won't be needing them. The day she told me about Sunday dinner at her parents' house, I nearly broke. Julia, please.
Not them.
Anyone but them. She folded her arms, her eyes unyielding. If we're serious about this, they need to see us as we are. No more hiding. My heart thudded. As we are? Julia, we're not. This isn't. She placed a finger gently against my lips. It is. You just haven't accepted it yet. That Sunday, she laid out the outfit with the same certainty she always carried: a pale lavender dress, modest but unmistakably feminine, with a pair of flats and a soft cardigan. I dressed with trembling hands, my reflection staring back like a stranger who had slowly taken over my life. On the drive to her parents' house, I could barely breathe. My palms slick with sweat, I rehearsed excuses in my head, lines I'd use when the questions began, when the laughter came. But when we stepped inside, it didn't happen the way I feared. Her mother looked at me for a long moment, her brow furrowed. Then, slowly, she smiled. Julia always was the strong one, she said gently. I suppose it makes sense she'd want a softer partner. Her father said nothing at first. He simply poured himself a glass of wine, studied me from across the table, and finally muttered, "Long as she's happy." That was it. No outrage. No scene. The ground didn't open beneath me. Julia held my hand through the meal, guiding me through conversation the way she always did: confident, protective, firm. I felt like a child learning how to walk again, stumbling, blushing, retreating. But each time I faltered, she was there, steady as ever. On the ride home, the silence between us felt charged. Finally, I whispered, why didn't they say more? Julia's smile was soft, almost triumphant.
Because they see what I see.
That you were never meant to stand beside me as a husband. You were meant to stand beside me as my bride. Her words dug into me, deeper than before. It wasn't just our secret anymore. It was real. A truth spoken aloud, witnessed by her family. That night, when I stood in front of the mirror, I realized my reflection no longer shocked me the way it once had. The dress, the makeup, the softer posture, they didn't feel like costumes. They felt expected. The question that haunted me wasn't whether I could stop. It was whether I wanted to. I thought facing Julia's parents would be the peak of humiliation, the moment I'd finally break free and tell her it had all gone too far. But instead, their quiet acceptance lodged in my chest like a stone. They hadn't laughed. They hadn't scolded. They had simply nodded, as if it made sense. And that strange sense of permission made it harder to fight. Days turned into weeks, and Julia only grew more certain in her role. She handled the bills, the household decisions, the conversations with neighbors. She spoke with the confidence of someone who had stepped fully into her skin, while I shrank into mine. Then one evening, she came home carrying a white box tied with a ribbon. She set it on the table with a smile that chilled me. "What's this?" I asked cautiously. "An invitation," she replied. "To what?" "Our next step." She slid the box toward me. Inside, resting on a bed of tissue paper, was a delicate veil. My throat tightened. "Julia, no. Please, this is too much." She reached across the table, taking my hands firmly in hers. "Mark, listen to me. We've danced around this long enough. You've worn the dresses, the makeup. My parents know. My friends have seen. What's left is only ceremony. And I want you to stand beside me not as my husband, but as my bride." The word hung in the air, heavy and undeniable. I pulled my hands free, pacing the kitchen like a trapped animal. "Julia, this isn't a joke anymore. People will talk. They'll know." She followed me with her eyes, calm, steady. "They already know." And the more you fight it, the more you suffer. But if you accept it, you'll see how free you can be. That night, I couldn't sleep. The veil lay folded on the dresser, glowing faintly in the moonlight. Every time I closed my eyes, I imagined myself standing in it, walking down an aisle. The weight of eyes on me not as Mark, but as someone else entirely. The next morning, Julia wasted no time. She began making lists, phone calls, plans. She spoke of gatherings, of friends and neighbors, of a celebration. She never used the word wedding, but she didn't need to. The implication was clear. When I protested, she silenced me with a look. This is happening, Mark. And when the day comes, you'll thank me. You'll finally see yourself the way I see you. Her certainty was terrifying. And yet, a treacherous part of me buried deep, ashamed, felt a flicker of something else. Not excitement, not joy, but inevitability. A week later, the first dress fitting arrived. She led me into a small boutique tucked away on a quiet street. The saleswoman greeted us warmly, her eyes lighting up as Julia introduced me not as her husband, but as her bride-to-be. I wanted the ground to swallow me whole. Instead, I stood frozen as gowns were draped over my arms, as fabric whispered against my skin, as Julia's approving gaze followed my every move. When I stepped out of the fitting room in a flowing ivory gown, the saleswoman clasped her hands. "Perfect," she declared. Julia's eyes shone with pride. "More than perfect. She's mine." The word she rang in my ears. And for the first time, I didn't correct it. The boutique visit should have been the point where I finally rebelled, where I tore off the gown, shouted that enough was enough, stormed out, and reclaimed whatever shreds of my old life still lingered. But I didn't. I let the saleswoman drape lace and silk over me. I stood as Julia circled, adjusting hems, smoothing fabric, whispering approving words that burned my ears. And when the woman called me, a radiant bride, I only flushed instead of correcting her. Julia didn't gloat.
She didn't need to.
Her silence was heavier than any laugh, her calm more commanding than any order. She knew she had won. The next weeks passed in a blur. Boxes arrived at the house, shoes, jewelry, invitations. She began speaking in casual, unshakable tones about the ceremony. "It won't be big," she said over breakfast one morning, sliding an envelope across the table. "Just friends, family, a few neighbors. Enough to make it real." I opened the envelope with shaking hands. Inside was an invitation printed in elegant script. "You are warmly invited to witness the union of Julia Reynolds and her bride." There was no name beneath mine. Just her bride. I felt sick. "Julia, you can't send these. You can't." Her eyes fixed on mine, calm but unmovable. "They're already sent." My stomach dropped.
Why?
"Why are you doing this to me?" She reached across the table, her hand firm on mine. "Because I've spent years pretending to be something I'm not, soft, secondary, silent. And you've spent years pretending to be strong when you were always aching to yield. This isn't punishment, Mark. This is truth. And it's time everyone saw it." I wanted to argue. I wanted to scream. But her grip tightened, and I realized my protests had grown weaker each time. She wasn't forcing me anymore. She didn't have to. The night before the ceremony, I lay awake staring at the ceiling. The dress hung on the closet door, ivory and shimmering in the faint light, a silent sentinel of the future waiting for me. My thoughts tumbled in circles. What if I ran? What if I disappeared before morning? But the image of Julia's eyes, steady, unwavering, certain, kept me pinned in place. Leaving her felt impossible, unthinkable. Morning came too soon. Julia woke me gently, brushing a strand of hair from my face. "It's time, my love." I wanted to beg for one more day, one more hour. But she was already guiding me from the bed, already laying the veil across my lap. The hours blurred after that. Makeup brushed against my skin, soft hands adjusting fabric, whispers of approval circling me. Each moment stripped away another layer of resistance until I was no longer Mark in a dress, I was simply her bride. By the time Julia took my hand and led me toward the gathering, my legs were trembling so hard I thought I'd collapse. The murmur of voices grew louder, the glow of candles spilling into the hall where friends and family waited. Every eye turned to me, every whisper stilled, and Julia, tall and certain, squeezed my hand and leaned close. "Walk with me," she whispered, "into the life we were always meant to have." The hall was filled with a soft glow, candles flickering, flowers arranged with simple elegance, chairs lined in neat rows. It wasn't a grand cathedral or a rented hall. It was Julia's vision, intimate but undeniable. Dozens of eyes turned as we entered. Her parents,
Her friends.
neighbors who had known me as Mark, the husband, now staring at me draped in ivory lace, veil trembling with every nervous breath. A hush fell over the room. My heart pounded so violently, I thought the lace across my chest would rip apart. Julia stood tall beside me, her hand firm on mine, her voice steady as she greeted the room. "Thank you for being here. Today I stand as who I was always meant to be, the one who leads, who protects, who provides." And beside me, she turned, her gaze sweeping over me like a claim, "is my bride. The one I have chosen, the one who belongs with me, the one who will walk with me from this day forward." I swallowed hard. My lips trembled, but no words came. Someone, an old family friend, perhaps stood at the front, holding a small book. Not a priest, not an official, but a chosen voice to bind this moment. "We are gathered to witness not tradition," the officiant began, "but truth. A union not defined by old roles, but by the bond between two souls who have found their places in each other." Every word seemed to echo, striking the walls of my chest. Then Julia turned to me, taking both my hands. Her grip was warm, unyielding. "Mark," she said, though the name sounded almost foreign now. "From the day we met, I knew you were kind, gentle, full of a softness the world rarely allows men to show. And I knew that strength was not in how loud you stood, but in how willing you were to give yourself fully. Today, I claim that gift. I vow to lead where you need guidance, to hold you when you falter, to love you not as my equal partner, but as my cherished bride." Her words fell on me like chains and wings at once, binding, lifting, suffocating. The officiant turned to me. "And do you, her bride, vow to walk beside her in devotion, in surrender, in trust, accepting her as your husband in all but name?" My mouth opened. No sound came. The silence stretched, heavy and unbearable. I felt every eye burning into me, every whisper hovering on the edge of breath. Julia squeezed my hands. "Say it," she whispered, her eyes never leaving mine. Tears stung my eyes. My voice cracked as it finally escaped. I do." The room exhaled as one, murmurs rippling. Some smiled, some looked away, but no one stopped it. No one saved me. The officiant raised their hand. "Then, by the vows spoken, I declare what was once hidden is now revealed. Julia stands as husband, and you stand as bride. May this truth bind you for as long as you walk together." Applause broke out, not wild, not mocking, but steady, approving. Julia leaned forward, lifting my veil. Her lips pressed against mine with a certainty that made my knees buckle. When she pulled away, her voice was low but firm, meant only for me. "It's done. You are mine, my bride." And I knew, in that moment, there was no undoing it. The world had seen. The vows were spoken. I was no longer just Mark. I was hers. The applause still echoed in my ears long after the last guest had gone. Empty glasses clinked on tables, flower petals lay scattered across the floor, and the hall smelled faintly of candles and champagne. Julia stood beside me, tall and steady, her hand never leaving mine. I felt hollow, weightless, as though I had walked through a dream I couldn't wake from. The veil still clung to my hair, the gown heavy on my shoulders. I wanted to strip it all away, but I didn't move. We walked home in silence, the night air cool against my flushed skin. Every step made the satin whisper around my legs, reminding me of what I had become in the eyes of everyone who had witnessed. Inside our home, Julia guided me to the mirror once more. "Look," she said softly. I stared. The person in the reflection was no longer shocking, no longer absurd, just inevitable. "You see it now, don't you?" she asked. My lips trembled. "I don't know who I am anymore." Her smile was calm, certain. "You don't need to know. I know. You're mine, my bride." For a moment, I thought it was done, that this strange ceremony was the peak of her plan, that somehow life might settle into quiet routine again. But Julia wasn't finished. The very next day, she handed me a folded piece of paper. My stomach sank as I opened it. It was a certificate, not legal, but decorative, ornate, with gold edges. Across the top, in bold script, it read, "Certificate of Union, Julia Reynolds, husband, and her bride." And beneath it, in careful calligraphy, was my name. But what froze my breath wasn't the certificate itself. It was the line scrawled beneath it in Julia's handwriting. "This is only the beginning. Next time, it won't just be family and friends, it will be the whole town." I looked up at her, horror and disbelief tangled in my chest. "Julia, you can't mean—" Her eyes glimmered, steady, unflinching. "Oh, I mean it. A bride belongs to be seen. And soon, everyone will know exactly who you are." My heart pounded. My world tilted. The walls seemed to close in as her words settled over me like another veil I could never lift. Because I realized she wasn't planning to stop. Not ever. If you were in my place, would you have gone through with it? Or would you have run before the vows? Tell me in the comments below. And don't forget to like this video, subscribe, and ring the bell for the next chapter, because Julia's plans are far from over, and the real test of being her bride hasn't even begun.